The Committee on Homeland Security, Subcommittee on Transportation Security will come to order. The subcommittee is meeting today to have its 10th hearing, I believe it is, or 10th hearing of the season to examine TSA's global efforts to protect the homeland from aviation threats and enhance security at last point of departure airports. Now, according to media reports, our allies in the UK believe that the Metrojet flight, I'm sorry. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. The recent Metrojet crash over the Sinai Peninsula is tragically reminiscent of the 1988 Lockerbie bombing, which took down Pan Am Flight 103, killing all aboard, including 35 Syracuse University students traveling home for the holidays. It also claimed the lives of one of my best friend's sisters who went to Oswego State University. Now, according to the media reports, our allies in the UK believe that the Metrojet flight was brought down by the very same type of device used in the Lockerbie bombing. It is deeply disturbing to me that innocent people from my district in Syracuse, as well as all of the traveling public, may still be threatened today by the same type of bomb used over 27 years ago. Even though this most recent attack was not targeted at American citizens or an American aircraft, we cannot and should not hesitate to learn from this tragedy and identify ways in which we can mitigate such threats from becoming successful again in the future. The international aviation system represents our modern globalized world. However, with interconnected transportation systems come interconnected risk. Much like the Lockerbie bombing affected my community in Syracuse all those years ago, the Metrojet tragedy affects our security as well. We cannot afford to ignore potential security lessons from this incident. Today, the Subcommittee on Transportation Security is holding this hearing to better understand the size and scope of TSA's global programs aimed at securing international aviation, as well as recent efforts to enhance security at overseas airports with direct flights to the United States. The recent tragic bombing of the Metrojet flight, which killed all 224 people on board, reminds us once again of the attractive target aviation is for terror groups. Additionally, if this attack was indeed carried out by the ISIS, as has been claimed, it represents a shift in the threat landscape against aviation and a newfound capability for ISIS in carrying out attacks. Because of this, TSA's overseas mission is now more important than ever, and it is critical that this subcommittee understands the extent of TSA's global reach, as well as how the U.S. government is working with its foreign partners and aviation stakeholders to enhance security at overseas airports. Moreover, efforts by other entities, such as the International Civil Aviation Organization, which plays a vital role in setting aviation security standards worldwide, are an essential component in proliferating security best practices and building capacity at high-risk airports around the world. Since the Lockerbie terror attacks, we have seen a number of attempted attacks against U.S. aviation targets. These plots, such as 9/11, the Christmas Day bomber, the printer cartridge bombs, and the shoe bomber, have each caused massive reevaluations in the way passengers are screened and security is maintained. I am very happy to see that TSA has taken steps to increase security at overseas airports in recent weeks, and I applaud their swift efforts in doing so. I hope these efforts will be successful. However, there remains gaps in security which need to be addressed. Specifically, this subcommittee has worked intensely throughout the 114th Congress to shed light on the serious lapses in security vetting among aviation workers with access to secure and sensitive areas of airports. Additionally, I remain very concerned at the overall state of airport access controls. We cannot solely focus on shuffling passengers through security screening while ignoring open back doors at airports. This subcommittee understands these vulnerabilities, which is why we have passed a number of bills, including 2 of my own, to close gaps in aviation worker vetting and enhance the security of airport access controls across the United States. These bills, together with our other oversight efforts, are bringing critical attention to a very important issue. These recent terrorist attacks in Egypt, Paris, Mali, and Lebanon reminded all of us in Congress of the important responsibility we have to the American people to ensure that their government is working to keep them safe from a wide array of determined and focused adversaries who are hell-bent on threatening our lives and way of life by terrorizing our cities and skies. It is with this sober understanding that we meet today to discuss efforts to secure overseas airports and international aviation. The chair now recognizes the ranking minority member of the subcommittee, the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Rice, for any statement she may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening this hearing. I also want to thank Deputy Assistant Administrator Terrell for coming to talk with us about TSA's efforts to secure international flights traveling to the United States from last point of departure airports abroad. As we all know, on October 31st of this year, Metrojet Flight 9268 crashed over Sinai, Egypt, after departing from Sharm el-Sheikh International Airport en route to Russia. Multiple sources have confirmed that a bomb smuggled on board the aircraft caused the crash, killing 224 people. Although Sharm el-Sheikh is not a last point of departure airport in which U.S. carriers and TSA work, there have been reports that security within the airport was weak. And those security concerns contributed to Britain's decision to suspend all flights to and from Sharm el-Sheikh in the immediate aftermath of the crash. The attacks in Paris and the shootings last week in California are the latest tragedies to remind us that the threat of terrorist attacks is very real and the risk is very high right now. The Metrojet bombing is a reminder that commercial flights are still a major target for terrorism. We have to be going above and beyond right now in our efforts to protect the American people, and part of that effort includes making sure that international airports with flights bound for the United States are fully complying with all aviation security standards, and that TSA and all relevant parties share all information about terrorist threats and security concerns. There are currently 308 last point of departure airports in the world, and every day more than 2,000 flights travel from foreign countries to the United States. TSA's Office of Global Strategies operates throughout Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and TSA representatives operate in countries with airports deemed critical to our national security. OGS recurrently certifies these airports by conducting security assessments and has deemed them low risk for outbound flights to travel directly to the United States. They are on the ground annually conducting more than 120 foreign airport assessments, 1,800 air carrier inspections, and 700 foreign repair station audits. It seems that OGS's methods are working efficiently, but we cannot afford to get comfortable or complacent right now because, again, the Metrojet bombing is all the indication we need to know that there are terrorist groups and radical individuals targeting commercial aviation. Mr. Terrell, in your written testimony, you mentioned the security directives and the emergency amendments that were coordinated at 8 last point of departure airports in response to the Metrojet crash. I'm eager to hear more about the measures taken in response to this crash, although I know we'll have to have that discussion in a secure setting. I appreciate Administrator Neffinger acting quickly to issue needed directives and amendments that will help eliminate any perceived vulnerabilities at last point of departure airports. I'm pleased to know that OGS participates in multilateral forums with the International Civil Aviation Organization, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, and many others. I think this collaboration is a testament to the fact that international aviation security is an ongoing, inclusive effort, and that your office is being proactive with your approach to enhancing security on international flights. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for convening this hearing. I look forward to a productive conversation today, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We are pleased to have a distinguished witness before us today on this important topic. This witness is Mr. Joseph Terrell. Did I pronounce that right? Joseph Terrell, who currently serves as Deputy Assistant Administrator in the Office of Global Strategies at the Transportation Security Administration. Previously, Mr. Terrell served as TSA's Federal Security Director at the Pittsburgh International Airport. The Chair now recognizes Mr. Terrell to testify.
Thank you. Chairman Katko, Ranking Member Rice, and members of the subcommittee, I am pleased to appear before you today to discuss the Transportation Security Administration's Office of Global Strategies in our efforts to mitigate the international aviation security risk to the United States. TSA's mission is to protect the nation's transportation systems to ensure freedom of movement for people and commerce. Within TSA, OJS works with international and domestic partners to reduce security risk to international transportation modes. OGS coordinates with foreign governments, air carriers, and international organizations to implement responses that effectively mitigate the likelihood of a successful attack. This involves a spectrum of activities to identify risk in terms of threat, vulnerability, and consequence, and develop mitigation plans. TSA assesses security at foreign airports served by U.S. aircraft operators and at foreign airports serving as the last point of departure for foreign air carriers. Under this authority, OGS identifies vulnerabilities at foreign locations through assessments of airports and inspections of air carriers from those airports to ensure they are operating at a minimum consistent with the security standards adopted by the International Civil Aviation Organization. In fiscal year 2015, our transportation security specialists performed hundreds of air carrier inspections in 146 foreign airport assessments, touching down in over 125 countries. We have a range of tools available to compel compliance with both agency and international requirements. OGS gathers data through foreign airport assessments, air carrier inspections, and other operational activities and feeds it into our risk methodology framework. We then analyze each area of concern to identify high-risk locations, possible attack methods, and key risk factors. Locations deemed problematic are evaluated with a focus on identifying vulnerabilities and root causes, and then to determine an appropriate mitigation strategy. OGS relies on a variety of tools to mitigate issues identified during airport assessments, inspections, and other visits. In the event of a specific threat or vulnerability, TSA may issue security directives to U.S. air carriers and emergency amendments to foreign air carriers for implementation at select last points of departure locations. Last month, TSA coordinated a global response with internal and external partners to develop SDs and EAs related to the crash of the Metrojet Flight 9268 in the Sinai Peninsula. OGS scheduled visits and coordinated inspections to the regulated air carriers to verify compliance with the additional measures. TSA also focuses on capacity development as a mitigation tool. We provide aviation security training to foreign partners through a variety of courses in screener supervisory skills, preventative security measures, crisis management, basic security, cargo security inspections, and train-the-trainer programs, among others. Additionally, TSA has provided equipment loans valued at around $3 million to 12 countries that do not have the allocated resources to procure their own equipment. Because mitigation measures overseas are implemented by each country's own personnel consistent with their own requirements, OGS relies on its internationally deployed workforce to influence key decision makers in foreign locations and industry partners to understand the threat, maintain awareness of vulnerabilities to the aviation security system, and encourage the implementation of mitigation strategies. Our talented international experts are highly respected and have helped establish and elevate globally consistent standards internationally. We also conduct extensive outreach and engagement at the global, regional, and bilateral levels with our international partners, and Administrator Neffinger has made these engagements a priority with 3 international trips during his first 5 months at TSA. OGS works regularly with ICAO to establish and enhance baseline international standards for aviation security. TSA's engagement is continuous, conducted at the highest organizational levels to discuss ongoing security vulnerabilities and to promote and share best practices with our international partners. As Administrator Neffinger commented to the international partners at the IATA Aviation Security World Conference in Dublin last month, achieving common goals calls for a shared approach, one that begins with a serious commitment to understanding security threats and then collaborating with one another to reduce vulnerabilities across many discrete elements of aviation system. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss TSA's work mitigating inbound risk to the United States from overseas, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Terrell, and I very much appreciate your testimony here today. We are in the midst of voting hell, I think, today. It looks like from a bunch of procedural votes are being called repeatedly, so we're probably going to be interrupted. We're going to be interrupted in about 10 minutes to have to go and vote, but we're going to get through a couple of rounds of questioning first if we can. And I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. And Mr. Terrell, I'll jump right into it. I was going to have you give me more of a background, but given the time constraints, I want to jump right into it. The security assessments, if I understood your testimony correctly, and the mitigation decisions are done by each country where their airport is located, correct?
Each country has an obligation under international agreement to ensure the security measures in their countries are consistent with international standards.
So basically, there's minimum international standards by which these countries are supposed to meet them, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Did that include Sharm el-Sheikh, just by curiosity?
It does.
Okay. And it's clear that they were not meeting those standards in retrospect.
It's easy to draw that conclusion.
What happens when an airport is not meeting the standards? What punitive measures, if any, can be taken?
There's a number of things, and I think it's important to draw a distinction of the types of vulnerabilities and threats that we address. First is when the threat is such that there aren't existing countermeasures in existence to deal with it. What we do then is work with our international partners to craft countermeasures, often reflected in SDs and EAs, to address that. The second are instances in which there are countermeasures that we believe are sufficient to address existing threat, if indeed they are implemented to the degree they're supposed to. And I think based on what we understand in the Sharm el-Sheikh case, that had the procedures been properly implemented, that there may have been a different outcome. So that it shapes our response to trying to work with foreign partners to assist Egyptians, or in other cases, provide opportunities for them to be able to actually implement appropriately the countermeasures.
So one of the concerns I have is that we shouldn't, and I'm not impugning TSA at all, but I don't think we should be in a position of waiting until something happens, then we realize there's a vulnerability, and then we act accordingly.
Yeah, and most certainly, if I may, we do not do that. And again, as I pointed out, in the past year alone, we visited 125 airports, and we are indeed in the vulnerability assessment business. And we do have a very robust means to compel compliance with international standards. Technically, given the authority that's presented to us by statute, with the concurrence of the State Department and the Secretary of Homeland Security, if we are concerned to the degree that conditions at a particular airport represent a risk to the traveling public, we could, or the U.S. government has the ability to be able to prohibit operations between that country and the United States.
Have they ever done that in the past?
It's happened a couple of times in the past, not recently.
Is there something that we can do legislatively that could help you, give you more freedom to do that more easily?
I think actually I would trumpet this as a success story, that there's a lot of instances in which we have been close, but given the resources, the focus, the attention that we present to these areas that have proven to be problematic, that we've negated the need to actually to go to that degree. That's a last case scenario, and in many instances we've been able to mitigate it for various number of means.
Now, as I understand it, TSA does have some authority to do assessments of airports internationally, correct?
We have, yes, we have requirement under statute to conduct assessments anywhere there's a U.S. civil aviation interest, and we do that.
Now, and if I understand it correctly, you have to give notice of these assessments, is that right?
Yes, we do.
All right. So that's part of my concern. Is there any way we can fix that so you don't give them so much notice? Kind of like, I'm thinking of internally. When GAO goes around, or some of the other ones go around to TSA domestically, they don't give them notice that they're doing it. And so I think that gives you a more genuine feel for the security preparedness at the airports and security vulnerabilities. And from that, we can craft proper legislation and patch up the holes. But when you go overseas and you have you give the notice of maybe it's a month ahead of time or whatever, it gives them opportunity to be on their best behavior when you're there. And that concerns me because that doesn't give you an accurate snapshot of the day-to-day activities at the airport. So is there something we can do to fix that so we can give you more increased ability to do the randomization that I think is really important?
Yeah, I certainly appreciate that question. Two things. First and foremost is that while we have a statutory authority to conduct these assessments, our statutory authority does not extend into these other states, of course, as you know. And quite often there's a bit of resistance to what is being perceived as extraterritoriality of our requirements. But I will point out that, it's almost a sixth sense, and I can speak with some authority here as a I started off as an inspector many, many years ago, and I think inspectors have a sixth sense about what they're seeing is actually legitimate, or a horse and pony show, as they say, or if it's something that we believe is a sustainable practice. One of the things we do in those cases where we believe that what we're seeing is not sustainable and indeed just a show for us is we do work, we gain a lot of significance from working with the host government in ensuring that given us by an understanding of the government's their own oversight program, their own training programs, their own regulatory requirements, all these things that give us some confidence of whether or not what we're seeing operational during these periodic visits is indeed sustainable.
Okay, I'll briefly, then my time's up here, but I want to just one quick follow-up question. Even if we don't have the ability legislatively to legislate what other countries do, we do have the ability to legislate what our airlines can do. So if our airlines are at foreign airports and foreign countries want to do business with us, isn't it fair to say that if we tell that airline, if you can't get an agreement from their government to allow random security checks at your airports by TSA, then you can't do business there? I think, couldn't that solve the problem?
I would, I'm not quite sure I'm prepared to answer that. I'm not, to be perfectly honest. And, you know, and again, I would like to reiterate that I don't think part of the reason we've been successful over a number of years is by operating collaboratively with a lot of these our foreign partners. You know, I would mention that 25 years ago that, you know, we were the only state conducting this activity. One of the things that we were often told is that the only reason that you are here, being us, is that there's a risk to these particular countries because the United States has a civil aviation interest involved. In the past 25 years since then, you know, after all the incidents that you just referred to, but including Australia and Bangkok and London and Madrid, we have a lot of partners that are emerging that have realized that the path that we chose 25 years ago is indeed the way to go. And we've been able to leverage our leadership and experience this in seeking collaboration with like-minded partners to join us in promoting international standards globally. We've been able to create communications and share information with a lot of our partners that we were unable to do, you know, 10 or 15 years ago. So I think we're making a lot of progress in trying to garner a coalition of like-minded partners to promote aviation security standards internationally. I think we've been very much the beneficiaries of that.
Okay, I have more questions, but I'm going to go for another. We'll do another round most likely. But the chair now recognizes the ranking minority member, Ms. Rice, for 5 minutes of questions. And then at the conclusion of her questions, we'll break, we'll vote real quick, and we'll come right back and get right at it again.
Thank you.
I think that we can all agree, and I'm sure you would agree, Mr. Terrell,
Yes, please.
that it's in every country, every airline, every security agency's best interest to ensure that an incident like what happened with the Russian jet does not happen in your country, because that could affect your economy. It can affect, you know, obviously issues of national security. So I think it's probably fair to assume that everyone starts from a point of wanting to have a level of inspection that they believe is going to be effective to prevent things like this from happening. I have a question about, I understand in the aftermath of the Metrojet bombing, the last point of departure airport security was increased at last point of departure airports, is that correct?
Yes.
Based on the directive by the, I believe it was Secretary Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Now, just out of curiosity, what about the airports that fly to last point of departure airports? Are the people, as in a directing, you know, as a stop along the way, not a direct flight, obviously, are the bags, are the passengers on that plane rescreened when they get to the last point of departure airport?
Yes, they are. Most states, and I say most states because there is some geographic locations where that isn't the case, but by and large, any operation to the United States that operates through a transit point, we require them to be treated as an originating flight. Their bags will be screened and passengers will be screened before continuing on.
How are the lines of communication between your agency and agencies of your type in other countries vis-a-vis threat levels, country-specific issues that are going on, information sharing? How is that all done?
Of course, it certainly depends on the state, but by and large, our community is a relatively small one, And to your point that you made earlier, we all have the same interest. Any security event, as the Egyptians are aware of right now, is incredibly damaging to their economies. We have, we're very active in multilateral organizations. We have 28 transportation security representatives that are around the world whose sole job is to foster these relationships with our counterparts globally. We have a number of sort of ad hoc groups, and so we're incredibly engaged with our counterparts. And there's a great thirst within our community also to share and participate collaboratively to the extent we can. You know, there's a great many nations who are in the exact same boat as we are.
So the chairman asked you a question about doing covert inspections, and I think it's probably a tough thing to legislate. But do we have agreements with any country on doing things like that, like what was done with TSA recently?
No, it is frowned upon, and if we were to conduct any, it'd be contrary to a lot of states' laws for us to be able to.
I understand that, but I'm talking about that's one of the things that we do here in this country to ensure that our aviation system is as safe as possible. Do we have conversations with other countries where we encourage them to do the same
I'm sorry, I
thing?
misunderstood. Yes, indeed. We are aware, and actually, it's not unusual for other states to have their own covert programs in place. And we find it beneficial to the extent that laws permit to be able to share and have these discussions. But yes, I misunderstood your question. I'm sorry.
So obviously, it's not just your agency that's responsible for inspections and security. I mean, you have ICAO, you've got the air carriers, you've got foreign governments. Just how is all that coordinated? I mean, look, all we have to do is look back at 9/11, and we see that there was certain information that was siloed within various government agencies that probably should not have, well, we know should not have been. And I think that 9/11 woke us up to the need for more open, liberal information sharing between agencies. So how, I mean, these are, you throw in different countries and different procedures, and how do you feel about the information that you get from other countries that may be something that we need to know?
I'm encouraged by the increase, just in terms of how all these different entities relate. ICAO, I think it's probably fair to say the requirements that they established sort of set the context within which each member state operates. States that have like-minded concerns and approaches towards aviation security, it's beneficial to both parties to share information. We, in turn, regulate each of our respective air carriers and airport operators consistent with international standards and the regulations, the requirements, rather, that each state imposes on its regulated entities. So it's a logical exchange, but again, the key is to open up communication and share information to the degree practicable. Most certainly, since the threat landscape has changed over the past 10 or 15 years.
I yield back.
We're going to take a brief recess at this time, subject to the call of the chair, but I anticipate it to be about 15 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The subcommittee is reconvened, and we just were awarded with another motion to adjourn, a third one in the last hour that's been filed by someone in Congress trying to be obstreperous, it appears. But nevertheless, we're going to have about another 15 minutes of questioning we can do, and we'll get to as much as we can. And seeing no other colleagues here, I'm going to go for another round of questioning between myself and Ms. Rice and anyone else who may appear. And I wanted to kind of touch on employees at foreign airports. Before I go back and if there's time to give you more of an overarching analysis of what we can do better over there and how we can help you have better security over there. It's my understanding that in a lot of these foreign airports, there's a lot of employees, just like in the United States, that are contract employees. And correct me if I'm wrong, is it fair to say that these contract employees are subject to screening standards that are implemented by the individual countries? Is that correct? Okay. Does TSA or the United States have any influence whatsoever over those screening procedures?
We do to a certain degree. It's a requirement under ICAO that each state provides background checks to each employee at airports and working for air carriers to the extent that is practicable under each state's laws. Recognizing privacy laws and that type of thing vary from state to state. But to the degree that we can influence and leverage partnerships with our relations with other states to encourage states that to create a robust vetting scheme for their employees, we do indeed do that. That's a routine part of our assessment activity.
So by the very definition of the standard you enunciated, it appears that there are divergent standards based on the countries involved. I know there is with respect to the United States and our Western European allies, because I was over there with a CODEL, as was Ms. Rice, and we saw firsthand that there was differences, part of which I think contributed to what happened in Paris. Their standards, their security standards just aren't as high as ours. So that's some of the concern we have with vulnerabilities at last point departure airports is, number one is, you have limited oversight capabilities, at least currently, for TSA over there. And you have, overlaid with that, varying degrees of oversight of employees in general and contract employees in particular. The airlines, I know, the U.S. carriers do a great job, I think, of taking security seriously, and that's obvious. But when you have the contract employees, the caterers, the people working on the engines, the people doing the things that you should be concerned about, my concern is, how do we plug the gap, or how can we do anything to try and require them to, under the ICAO or anything else, to do a better job? Because I know some just aren't doing a good job screening their employees.
Yeah, there's a number of ways that we can, and then we do that. One, as I mentioned earlier, I just want to restate that if we do believe that a state has a deficient or inadequate system of background checks, we remind them of their obligation under ICAO and provide recommendations that we believe would help them. Secondly, in terms of bridging gaps when there are deficiencies, we do indeed require flight crew, cabin crew who fly to the United States to be vetted to our standard before they're allowed to fly aircraft, participate in aircraft activities to the U.S. And we also, as I'm sure you know, through our secure flight program, vet each and every person who flies as a passenger to the United States. So I think those, and I'll mention one other thing too, that if we do not have luck with a host government and trying to provide, sort of a more vigorous vetting process, and then we can define levy other requirements on air carriers to put a bubble around the operations to the United States, such as make sure that there are aircraft guards to ensure there's no unauthorized approaching, to make sure that the catering that you mentioned is indeed screened and checked before it boards an aircraft destined to the United States, and we make those requirements to compensate for instances in which we're not happy with what the host government provides.
Right, I understand, but for example, mechanics. I mean, if a mechanic breaks bad, they could do something on an airplane a problem that could only manifest itself once they're in the air. And Those are the types of things I'm concerned about, is finding the needle in the haystack, the lone wolf, which is so vexing here in the United States with our higher standards. And I worry about it doubly so in foreign countries where their standards may not be as high as ours, right? And so because of that, it seems to me that we got to do more. And I know this is a concern that was enunciated by the airline industry. We had a roundtable with them last week, and they were certainly concerned about that, amongst other things. But that's one thing that they're very concerned about is, you know, different countries have different standards for screening. And, you know, you have limited ability to be a watchdog internationally. And it seems to me that it really is a gaping vulnerability. And I understand that you say that there's some things that are good and you're doing all right with, but it seems to me we got to find ways of not just saying what's okay, but how to fix the things that aren't okay. And to me, this is one of those things that is not okay. So I'd be interested in hearing from you briefly of the concerns you have with the vetting of employees and the screening of employees internationally. What can we do to stop it other than what you described, putting a bubble on an airplane type of thing? Let's face it, some airports you go to internationally, you have nothing but foreigners, foreign contract carriers to work on the engines. So you can't put a bubble around the individual that's working on your engine. So how do we try and fix what I see as a security vulnerability?
We can, what we can control are the requirements that are in place for aircraft that operate to the United States. And we have, it's within the FAA purview, but yeah, I do believe, for example, using mechanics as an example, that they have to, any type of maintenance is done at a FAA certified location. There's a number of measures in place. I think one of the things that we were starting to really...
I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Terrell, but it's getting a little frustrating because you're not telling me things that need to be fixed, and I'm hearing from the airline industry things need to be fixed. So instead of just telling us the good things, tell us about the bad things, because that's what we're really here to do, is try and help you guys, give you the tools to fix the things that need to be fixed.
Yeah, what I was hoping to clarify is that there are, you know, just by virtue of the fact that we're trying to promote change in locations in which we do not have expressed authority, that there are a number of ways that we, by leveraging partnerships, by working, trying to raise standards within with international organizations, you know, by leveraging partners that may be more influential in other parts of the world that we are, to try to promote standards. We've had, I think we've had a lot of success in you know, again, as I mentioned, by virtue of you know, our leadership internationally, we're resourced. We, you know, we provide. We've been recently providing training to states on conducting their own assessment programs. So we have a number of different ways, I think, in which we have been very creative, very aggressive in trying to promote standards internationally.
All right, so it's, according to you, though, then there's nothing else we need to do. Is that right?
When you say we...
the United States, to help shore up security internationally. You've not told us one thing in all the testimony today of anything that needs to be shored up internationally that we can help you with. Is there, if that's the case, there's nothing, just tell us that.
Well, with all due respect, I think what we have really is just a continuum on our part of trying to continuously elevate standards.
I understand that. Is there something we can do to help you, or do you not need our help?
I'm an operational guy, sir. As far as what the Congress can do for us, I would probably best leave to others. I mean, I'm not, I don't really quite, I haven't thought that one through. Perhaps I need some time to think about it and get back to you.
The chair now recognizes Ms. Rice for questions.
Sir, in your testimony, you said that your office conducted 146 foreign airport assessments in fiscal year 2015. What were the outcomes in general? Were they all satisfactory? Were they all passing? Were they some failing? Did some have to be taken out of, you know?
In almost every instance, there are opportunities that there are the way we characterize is discrepancies noted.
Okay, so give me the top 5 discrepancies that you noted in these foreign airport assessments in fiscal year 2015.
I would, just off the top of my head, I would think that access ID is the...
So people not having it, losing it, and not being reported?
Just not wearing them, just not
Not
wearing
wearing
them. Yep. Yeah, I would think if we were going to summarize that there's probably more issues associated with access control more than anything else, which is problematic. And I'm not sure that isn't necessarily related to the fact that because of the importance of that in the security airport regime, that we pay very close attention to that too.
Okay, anything deficient about the background checks they do for their contract employees in the airports?
Again, there are states that are there. They would probably, consistent with international standards, do employment checks and background checks, and are not permitted by their own privacy laws to conduct criminal background checks. This is something that we work constantly with certain key states to try to ensure the importance of them having a keener picture on the criminal background of the folks that they're providing access to secured airports.
Do you do a summary of the foreign airport assessments you do for every fiscal year?
Yes, in terms of results and
Yeah.
we most definitely use them for our purposes to identify trends.
So what I'd like to do is see if you could provide the committee with those reports, because the chairman's questions before had to do with what are ways that you think that we can help you. And it seems to me that the key to that is for us to see what your assessment is of foreign airports with whom we do business from an economic standpoint, but certainly from a national security standpoint and a public safety standpoint. Why don't we take a look at that and see if we can come up with ways that, maybe not necessarily through legislation, but ways that we might be able to take these assessments that are, the purpose of which is to ensure that every foreign country with whom we do business is actually maintaining a level of a standard of care, if you will, right? That gives us the confidence that we can tell our airlines flying to those countries, you're okay to fly there and everyone's safe and you should continue, Americans, to travel wherever you want to go. Maybe if we could take a look at that report, that would be a good starting point. So if you could provide us that would be great.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, are there currently, as you sit here, any regions or countries that you believe requires more of a presence from OGS, and if so, why?
Yeah, I would say absolutely there are, and part of our how we allocate resources and ensure that the limited number of people that we have are used most efficiently is, we definitely have a risk methodology in which we gauge vulnerabilities at specific locations.
So do you have specific countries that you have concerns about, or regions?
Yes, we do.
You do. Are you not able to say that in an open setting?
I would prefer not
Okay,
to.
great.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you this. So you did 146 assessments. How many foreign airports are there?
300 and something, I think.
So is it every other year they can expect to be inspected?
It
or
depends.
Is there a requirement?
No. Well, again, some airports we visit quarterly. Some airports we don't visit for a few years.
And you make the risk assessment?
Oh,
based on
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
Is that a question of if you had more resources, you would do 300 plus assessments
Not
a year?
necessarily. I mean, to be perfectly honest, there's a number of airports that we have full confidence, not only in the countermeasures that are in place at that location, but also the thoroughness and effectiveness of the oversight and the seriousness with which the particular government takes these matters. We have a lot of partners that view things the exact same way that we do.
Okay. I yield back.
Briefly, and then I think we're going to have to wrap up here. We can submit the rest of our questions if you agree, Ms. Rice, on paper, and we'll submit them to TSA and ask them to answer them. One refrain that I've heard from the airline industry is that information sharing subsequent to an incident is good at first, and then it seems to tail off. And I think that bears itself out with respect to the Metrojet incident. The airlines learn from the information you give them whether or not they think it's important. So I ask when you go back to TSA, let them know that, encourage them to continue the lines of communication, even if they think with the information they have is nothing to offer. I kind of liken it to the days when I was talking to witnesses as a prosecutor. They would not tell me some things, and they said, well, I didn't think that was important. And I say, let us decide what's important. So let the airlines decide what's important, and just any information, any tidbits you have, either helping or hurting an investigation, let them know as soon as you can, because they can build upon that. Yeah. And I ask that you do that, and they asked me to convey that message to you as well.
We'll do so.
The rest of the information, well, I think we'll submit in writing. Yeah. And we appreciate your time here today, sir. We're sorry for the breaks, but some people are deciding to have fun today in Congress by calling these motions to adjourn repeatedly, so we're going to have to deal with them. Thank you very much, and the hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you.